A stoic professor's orderly world is shattered by a secret admirer. Shy notes and intimate gifts appear, a hauntingly beautiful campaign that cracks his solitude wide open. Who is watching him so closely, and what will happen when the professor, heart laid bare, decides to uncover the artist behind the mystery? Episode 1: The First Orchid. My world is built on order, the precise cadence of a lecture, the clean architecture of a thesis, the predictable silence of my office after the last student shuffles out. It's a world of my own making, a fortress of the mind where I am both king and sole inhabitant. Or so I believed until the morning the first orchid appeared. It sat in the exact center of my worn oak desk, a pristine, impossible white against the dark wood. A single, perfect phalaenopsis blossom in a simple terracotta pot. No note, no ribbon, just this silent, breathtaking intrusion. I froze in the doorway, my leather satchel suddenly heavy in my hand. My first, terribly professional thought was that the department secretary had misplaced a gift, but the air in the room felt different, charged, as if the molecules themselves were whispering a secret I couldn't yet hear. I approached slowly, as one would a sleeping predator, and set my things down. My fingers hovered over the velvety petal but didn't touch. Its scent was faint, a cool, clean fragrance that somehow cut through the usual odors of old books and dust. "Who sees the man behind the professor?" I murmured to the empty room, the question escaping before I could cage it. My voice, usually so confident filling lecture halls, sounded thin and unfamiliar. The flutter in my chest was absurd. It was just a plant, a beautiful, anonymous, utterly perplexing plant. The entire day was colored by its presence. During my Victorian poetry seminar, my lecture on the dramatic monologue felt hollow. I found my eyes straying from my notes, scanning the 24 faces before me. Were they watching me? Was it the intense girl in the front row who annotated every slide with fervent precision? The quiet young man in the corner by the window, whose essays were startlingly perceptive? My gaze swept over them, searching for a flicker of guilt, a spark of shared knowledge. All I saw was the usual tapestry of academic fatigue and polite interest. A voice from the back asked a question about Browning's Duke, and I startled. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" I asked, forcing a calm I didn't feel. The student repeated it, and I answered on autopilot, my mind a world away, tethered to that white flower on my desk. Back in my office after class, the orchid dominated the space. It was a siren sitting in a sea of paperwork. I couldn't work. I sat and stared at it, the mystery of it unraveling my tightly wound composure. This wasn't a prank. A prank would be a whoopee cushion, a fake spider. This was deliberate. This was intimate. Someone had walked into my sanctuary, my private cell, and left a piece of gentle beauty. They had seen the starkness of my existence and decided to soften it. The thought was more terrifying than any critique. The cleaning staff knew nothing. The secretary smiled and shook her head, a curious glint in her eye. "A secret admirer, Professor Reed?" she teased, and I waved her off with a stiffness that felt like panic. I was Professor Alistair Reed, Ph.D., a scholar of emotional repression in 19th century literature. I was not a man who received flowers. For a week, nothing. The orchid remained, a silent companion. I watered it meticulously, feeling a strange connection to my anonymous benefactor through the act. Had they given up? Had it been a one-time whim? A part of me, the part that cherished my solitary order, hoped so, but a larger, newly awakened part, a part that had spent 7 days with a heart perpetually halfway up his throat, ached with a bitter disappointment. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, the second gift came. It was a book, not a new academic tome, but a slender, cloth-bound volume of John Keats' poetry, the cover soft with age. It was placed squarely on my chair, as if waiting for me to take my seat and discover it. This time, there was a note, a single heavy cream card slipped between the pages of Ode to a Nightingale. My hands were not steady as I picked it up. The handwriting was elegant, slightly italic, written in a deep emerald green ink that felt like a shout in the quiet room. To the lonely nightingale who sings only of others' passions, I hear your true song. It haunts me. Yours. The air left my lungs in a rush. I sat down hard, the book clutched to my chest. Yours. The word seemed to burn through the parchment. This wasn't admiration for my lectures. This was a declaration. Someone was listening past my words, past my professional persona. They heard a song I didn't even know I was singing. A laugh, shaky and disbelieving, escaped me. "This is insane," I whispered to the empty room, but the room didn't agree. It felt alive, humming with the ghost of the person who had been here, who had touched this book, who had chosen these words for me. I traced the handwriting with a tentative finger. It was a man's hand, I was almost sure of it. The certainty settled in my gut, warm and terrifying. That's when I remembered him, Leo Chen, from my large romanticism lecture. He always sat in the third row, off to the left. He never spoke, but he was always there, his head bent over his notebook, writing incessantly. Last week, during a lecture on the Sublime and Wordsworth, I'd caught his eye, just for a second. He hadn't looked away in the usual student hurry. He'd held my gaze, and in that fragment of a moment, I'd seen not just attention, but a deep, quiet understanding. Then he'd glanced down, a faint blush coloring his cheeks, and scribbled something furiously. Could it be? The thought was a lightning strike. I stood, pacing the small confines of my office. No, it was a fantasy, a narrative constructed by a lonely heart and a few poetic gifts. He was just a student, a bright, quiet student with soulful eyes. But the seed was planted. The next morning, as I stood before my 200 students, my lecture on Byron's doomed romances felt like a meta-commentary on my own life. My eyes found him instantly, Leo. His dark hair was falling into his eyes as he wrote. Was he taking notes, or was he writing another note for me? My voice almost faltered. Byron believed we were all slaves to our passions, I said, the words tasting new on my tongue. We were all slaves to our passions, that the greatest tragedy was a life lived in cautious restraint. As I spoke, Leo looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded hall. This time he didn't look away, and for a breathtaking, world-stopping second, I saw it, a flicker of something bold and beautiful and scared, a secret silently offered. He looked down first, but the connection had been made, a wire strung taut between his desk and my podium. Back in my office, the orchid and the Keats sat side by side, a tiny altar to this impossible thing. The chase was no longer an intellectual puzzle, it was a physical ache, a yearning to solve the mystery of the hand that had offered these gifts and the heart that had dictated them. I opened the book of Keats again, to the marked poem. My own voice was a mere whisper in the sacred quiet, reading the note aloud once more. It haunts me. I closed my eyes, the ghost of a green-inked confession dancing behind my eyelids. The game had begun, and I, the professor who had everything figured out, was utterly, deliciously undone. Episode 2. The Haunting Sketchbook. The air in my office still hummed with the echo of a single word, yours. That green-inked confession had rewired my reality. For 2 days I moved through my life as a ghost, lecturing on autopilot, while my mind replayed that moment in the lecture hall. The unflinching depth in Leo Chen's eyes, the silent conversation that passed between us. I was a man obsessed, studying him from my podium as if he were a newly discovered sonnet, every flicker of his expression a line to be analyzed. This morning, my heart was a frantic prisoner against my ribs before I even turned the key. Would there be another gift? Or had my gaze, too intense, too searching, scared the mystery away? The door swung open to reveal nothing, just my desk, the orchid, the orderly silence. A crushing disappointment settled in my stomach. I'd become an addict in a week, and my supply had been cut. The day dragged, a monochrome stretch of minutes. My romanticism lecture was a particular torture. Leo was there, in his usual seat. He took notes, he listened, he never once looked at me. The connection I thought I'd felt seemed a figment of my desperate imagination. The sublime is not just in the landscape, I heard myself say, my voice flat, but in the terrifying, exhilarating capacity of the human heart to feel it. The words, which usually fired my soul, felt like ash. It wasn't until I returned to my office after a dismal department meeting that I saw it. Not on the desk, but placed carefully on the visitor's chair, as if waiting for an appointment. A simple, black, hardbound sketchbook. My satchel slid from my shoulder and thudded to the floor. The room was preternaturally still. I approached the chair as if the book might explode, my breath shallow in my throat. I picked it up. It was warm, or perhaps that was my own blood rushing to my fingertips. I opened it. The world stopped. The first page was a drawing in charcoal, stunning in its detail and its intimacy. It was me, at my podium, but not as my students see me. My head was tilted, a hand resting pensively on my chin as I listened to an unseen question. The thinker's frown from the note was there, but rendered with such tenderness it looked like wisdom, not irritation. The artist had captured the exact way my shirt pulls across my shoulders when I lean forward. With trembling hands I turned the page, another and another. Me grading by the window, afternoon light haloing my messy hair. Me mid-laugh in the faculty lounge, a moment I didn't think anyone had witnessed. Me looking out at the rain, my profile etched with a loneliness I thought I'd mastered. Page after page, a breathtaking, unauthorized biography of my own life. The skill was extraordinary, each line flowing with a confidence that spoke of deep, sustained observation. This wasn't a casual sketch. This was study. This was devotion. And then, on the last drawn page, I found it. This was the one that broke me. It was a close-up, just my eyes, looking directly out from the paper. The artist had captured something I never show, a vulnerability, a hidden warmth, a silent plea. Scribbled in the margin in that now beloved green ink were the words, "You have a thinker's frown, but I dream of your smile." A choked sound escaped me, part sob, part laugh. I sank into my chair, the sketchbook pressed to my chest, as if I could absorb the affection poured into every stroke. He sees me. He truly sees me. The evidence was indisputable. The perspective of every sketch, the angle from the third row, left side. It was him. It had to be Leo. The mystery was solved, and yet it had only just begun. Now I knew the who, but the why, the terrifying, wonderful what next, hung in the air, more potent than ever. The next day I was a man transformed. A secret knowledge powered my steps. In the lecture hall, I felt a new authority, a thrilling complicity. I taught with a passion I hadn't felt in years, speaking directly to the sublime, to the courage of confession. My eyes kept finding him, and this time I didn't look away. I saw the faint blush on his neck as I quoted Keats. "Beauty is truth, truth beauty," I recited, holding his gaze, letting the words hang between us, a shared palpable thing. After class, I made a decision. As the students filed out, I busied myself with my notes. He was always one of the last to leave, meticulous in packing his bag. I heard his footsteps approach the door, and I looked up. "Leo," I said, and my voice was calm, a professor's voice, belying the storm within. He froze, his back to me, his shoulders tense. Slowly he turned. His eyes, those deep, observant eyes, were wide with a deer-in-the-headlights panic. "Professor Reed?" The space between us crackled. I held up the black sketchbook, which I'd brought with me. His gaze dropped to it, and his breath hitched audibly. A stunning, profound silence filled the lecture hall. "This is extraordinary work," I said gently, tapping the cover. "The technical skill, the emotional perception, it's remarkable." He said nothing, just stared, his cheeks flushing a beautiful, furious scarlet. The air was so thick with unsaid words I could taste them, metallic and sweet, like a first kiss. I took a step closer, closing the distance. I could see the faint tremor in his hands. "Why?" I asked, and it wasn't a professor's question. It was a man's plea, raw and stripped bare. The single word hung there, a bridge between our two lonely worlds. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes shone with unshed tears, with fear, with a hope so fragile it shattered my last remaining defenses. He took a half step back, then turned and almost fled from the room. I didn't follow. I stood there, clutching the sketchbook that contained my soul, watching the empty doorway where he'd vanished. The chase was over. The ache, however, had just begun. It was a living thing now, a heartbeat in the silence, waiting for his answer. Episode 3. The Perfect Espresso. Silence. For 3 days, the only sound in my office has been the frantic, unanswered echo of my own whispered why. Leo vanished after fleeing the lecture hall. He hasn't returned to class. The space where he used to sit, in the third row, left side, is a glaring, hollow ache. The sketchbook lies on my desk, a sacred and terrifying artifact. I touch its cover a dozen times a day, as if it's a talisman that could summon him back. I have my answer, the breathtaking, undeniable who, and yet, in his absence, it feels like a diagnosis for a fatal disease. I scared him away. My pursuit, my desperate need to know, shattered the delicate glass world he'd been building for us. The orchid mocks me with its serene beauty. The Keats feels like a funeral dirge. I am a man haunted by a ghost I myself exorcised. This morning, the thick fog blankets the campus, mirroring the gray static in my mind. I trudge to my building, a condemned man walking his last mile. I don't expect a gift. I expect the crushing, permanent weight of my own regret. I fumble with the key, my shoulders already slumped in defeat. I push the door open. The smell hits me first, rich, dark, fragrant, not the floral ghost of the orchid, but something vital, caffeinated, and profoundly human. There, centered perfectly on a small napkin, is a tiny porcelain cup, a single espresso. Steam still curls from its surface in a lazy, inviting ribbon. Beside it, another cream card. My knees go weak. I have to brace myself against the doorframe. He's back, or at least his voice is. I don't rush. I'm afraid to. I hang up my coat with trembling fingers, my eyes never leaving the cup. I approach as if it's a holy relic. The espresso is the color of polished mahogany, with a perfect crema golden as a sunset. It's from the little Italian cafe 2 blocks over, the one I sometimes hide in on grading days. He knows that too. Finally, I pick up the note. The green ink is like an old friend now, a lover's handwriting. Your voice is my favorite sound. It's the compass that guides me through my week. Still yours. Still yours. The 2 words are a lifeline, an absolution, a promise. A sob of sheer relief clots in my throat. He isn't gone. He's here, closer than ever, speaking to me in this intimate, caffeinated language. He listens to my voice not for its lectures, but for its music. The thought is so profoundly intimate it steals my breath. I lift the cup. It's the perfect temperature. I take a sip. It's bitter, deep, and invigorating, the exact way I take it. No sugar, no milk. How many times had he watched me? How many tiny details of my existence had he collected and cataloged in his beautiful, artistic mind? The fog outside my window seems to glow. The entire world sharpens into crystalline focus. He's declaring himself, not with grand gestures, but with perfect personal understanding. He's saying, I see your rituals. I honor your tastes. I am here. My morning lecture is a revelation. I am electrified, every nerve ending alive. I speak on the passion of the Romantics not as a scholar, but as a fellow traveler. My voice, which he called his favorite sound, is full of a new, raw emotion. And then, just as I'm describing the ache of unrequited love in a Shelley poem, the door at the back of the hall clicks open. He slips in. Leo. He keeps his head down, but he's here. He slides into an empty seat in the very last row, a shadow trying to remain unseen. But I see him. The compass needle of my soul swings violently to true north. My pulse becomes a wild staccato rhythm against my ribs. Could it possibly be you, I think? The words a frantic, beautiful mantra in my mind? The artist, the poet, the bringer of coffee and light. Is it really you? I don't stare. I'm terrified of frightening him off again, but I feel his gaze on me like a physical touch, a warm pressure against my skin. I finished the lecture, my voice dropping to a near whisper for the final poignant line of poetry, speaking it directly into the space between us. The class ends, students shuffle out. He's slow, gathering his things with deliberate care. This is our new dance. I pretend to organize my podium, my heart hammering so loudly, I'm sure the entire building can hear it. He passes by my podium, a blur of dark hair and a gray sweater. He doesn't look at me, but as he passes, his arm brushes lightly, accidentally on purpose, against the stack of books at my side. A small folded square of paper, the same cream card, flutters from his sleeve and lands, face up, on my open textbook. He doesn't break stride. He walks out the door and is gone. I stare at the note. It contains only 4 words, written in that glorious emerald script. Your office after 4. The air leaves my lungs in a dizzying rush. This is it. No more gifts, no more ghosts. A meeting, a reckoning. The thought is equally terrifying and exhilarating. 4 o'clock. The hour stretches before me, an eternity and a heartbeat all at once. I return to my office. The empty espresso cup sits beside the thriving orchid, the well-loved Keats, the haunting sketchbook, a shrine to our strange, beautiful courtship. I trace the rim of the cup, where his hands must have held it, where his mind planned this next brave step. The silence now is different. It's no longer empty. It's pregnant, humming with anticipation. It's the silent, breath-held moment before the first note of a symphony, before the first kiss. He is no longer my secret admirer. He is my appointment, and every beat of my heart is a countdown to 4. Episode 4, The Question and the Answer. 4 o'clock. The 2 words became the axis on which my entire world spun. The hands of the clock on my office wall, usually silent companions, now ticked with the weight of sledgehammers. Each stroke was a drum roll, a death knell, a birth cry. I tried to grade papers. The words swam into incoherent ink blots. I tried to read. The sentences unspooled into meaningless threads. All I could do was wait, imprisoned in a delicious, agonizing limbo between the man I was and the man this mystery was forcing me to become. The espresso cup sat empty, a relic of the morning's hope. The sketchbook lay closed, a story waiting for its next chapter. At 3:55, I stood and paced the short confines of my office, my blood singing a frantic, primal song in my veins. I straightened my tie, then loosened it, ran a hand through my hair. What would I say? The professor in me scrambled for appropriate phrases. The man beneath, raw and laid bare by weeks of secret poetry, had only one. Why? At exactly 4 o'clock, a soft knock echoed through the wooden door. The sound was so quiet, so tentative, I almost thought I'd imagined it. My breath hitched. "Come in," I said, and my voice was a stranger's, low, strained, full of a hope I could no longer disguise. The door opened slowly. Leo stood in the threshold, backlit by the muted afternoon light from the hallway. He looked like a ghost-given form, pale and beautiful and terrified. His knuckles were white where he gripped the strap of his messenger bag. For a long, suspended moment, we just stared at each other across the space, the air between us crackling with 1,000 unsaid volts. "Close the door," I said softly. Not a command, but a plea for privacy, for the sanctity of whatever was about to happen. He obeyed, the click of the latch sounding final. The room shrank, becoming a universe containing only us. He took a single step forward, then stopped, his gaze fixed on the floor near my feet. "The sketchbook," he began, his voice a rough whisper, so different from the smooth, confident green ink. I'm so sorry. It was an intrusion. I shouldn't have—" "It was the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," I interrupted, the truth leaving me in a rush. I saw him flinch, his eyes flicking up to meet mine for a heartbeat before skittering away. The raw vulnerability in them shattered my last pretense of professional distance. I took a step toward him, then another. The space between us dwindled from miles to inches. I could see the faint dusting of freckles across his nose, the rapid flutter of his pulse in his throat, the scent of him, graphite, rain, and something uniquely, essentially Leo, wrapped around me. "Why, Leo?" I asked again, the question that had haunted me, now a bare, trembling thing in the quiet room. The notes, the gifts, why me? He finally, truly looked at me. His dark eyes were oceans, deep enough to drown in, shimmering with a courage that seemed to cost him everything. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. When he spoke, his words were a whispered confession, meant only for the sacred space between our hearts. "Because when you talk about poetry, Professor," he breathed, the title feeling like an endearment on his lips, I don't hear words, I feel my soul waking up." The world stopped. The clock ceased its ticking. Every gift, every note, every lingering glance crystallized into perfect, heartbreaking sense. It wasn't about me, Alistair Reed, the scholar. It was about the passion I thought I'd buried, the song he alone had heard. He saw the ember still glowing in the ash of my routine and had gently, patiently blown it back to life. A sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a sob. All the practiced speeches, all the intellectual curiosity evaporated. There was only this truth, this beautiful, terrifying boy who had rewired my existence with his quiet devotion. "My soul," I echoed, my own voice thick with emotion, "has been asleep for a very long time." It was all the permission he needed, or perhaps it was all the courage I finally found. I closed the last infinitesimal gap between us. My hand of its own volition lifted and gently cupped his cheek. His skin was warm, so alive under my touch. He leaned into the caress, his eyes fluttering closed for a second, a single perfect tear tracing a path down his cheek. "Leo," I whispered, my thumb brushing the tear away. His eyes opened, holding a universe of hope. "Alistair," he whispered back, testing my name, and it was the most profound, intimate gift of all. And then I kissed him. It was not a professor kissing a student. It was one lonely soul finding its echo in another. It was soft and tentative and tasted of espresso and unspoken sonnets. It was the answer to every question, the culmination of every lingering glance, the physical manifestation of a green-inked yours. His hands came up, fisting gently in the fabric of my shirt, anchoring himself to me as the world dissolved into a haze of pure, radiant feeling. When we finally parted, breathless and trembling, our foreheads rested together. The silence was no longer empty, it was full. It hummed with the echo of his whisper and the pounding of our hearts, a synchronized rhythm of newfound belonging. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his lips curved in the smile I had only ever dreamed of, shy, dazzling, and meant only for me. The thinker's frown was gone from my own face, banished by his courage. The secret admirer was gone, but in his place, holding my face as if I were the most precious, fragile work of art, was the man who loved me. And I knew, with a certainty that sang in my blood, that this was not an end. It was a prologue written in a kiss, and our story was only just beginning. Episode 5. The Song Unbound. The kiss did not end. It deepened. It evolved from a question into a language, a fluent, aching dialect spoken only with breath and touch. The careful space we had maintained for weeks collapsed in an instant, replaced by a feverish, desperate closeness. My back met the solid edge of my desk, and a soft gasp escaped me, swallowed by his mouth. Books and papers were an irrelevance, a mundane world pushed aside by this cataclysm of feeling. His hands, the artist's hands that had traced my soul on paper, now mapped the reality of me. They slid from my face, down the column of my throat, over the frantic beat of my heart, coming to rest at my waist, gripping with a possessiveness that made my knees weak. I answered in kind, my fingers tangling in the soft, dark silk of his hair, pulling him closer, eliminating any last whisper of separation. The taste of him, sweet like the tea he must have drunk, and dark like the espresso he'd brought me, was an intoxicant. We broke apart, panting, foreheads still pressed together. The air in the office was charged, thick with the scent of old paper, orchid, and the undeniable musk of desire. His eyes were dark pools, the shy student utterly consumed by a raw, breathtaking hunger that mirrored my own. "Leo," I breathed, his name a prayer, a curse, a celebration. "Alistair," he whispered back, his voice a rough, sensual scrape against my nerve endings. He said it again, as if savoring the shape of it. "Alistair." His lips found the sensitive skin just below my ear, and a full-bodied tremor racked me. "The admirer is gone," he murmured, the words a hot promise against my throat. His hands moved to the buttons of my shirt, his fingers deft and surprisingly steady. "Let the man who loves you take his place." A shuddering moan escaped me. Love, he'd said the word. It hung in the air, no longer a subtext in green ink, but a living, breathing truth spoken against my skin. I captured his mouth again, my own hands slipping beneath the soft wool of his sweater, seeking the warm, smooth plane of his back. He arched into the touch, a broken, beautiful sound vibrating from his chest into mine. It was a frantic, beautiful undoing. We were a tangle of limbs and whispered pleas, of garments discarded like fallen leaves. The stoic professor, the shy admirer, those shells lay in a heap on the floor. What remained was pure, unadorned need. My desk, the fortress of my solitary intellect, became an altar to a new kind of knowledge. The cool wood was a shock against my feverish skin, soon warmed by the heat of him above me, around me. There was no more poetry in words. The poetry was in the slide of skin on skin, in the symphony of our ragged breaths, in the silent, sacred communication of our bodies. He looked down at me, his face a masterpiece of awe and passion, and in that moment I was truly seen, not just my mind, but my entirety. Every scar, every flaw, every hidden yearning laid bare and worshipped. Later, we lay tangled in the fading afternoon light, wrapped in my too-small sofa, covered only by my discarded suit jacket. Our hearts beat a slow, synchronized rhythm of aftermath. His head was on my chest, my fingers tracing idle, possessive circles on his bare shoulder. He tilted his head up, his smile lazy and sated. "So," he whispered, his finger drawing a nonsensical pattern over my heart. "What does the professor have to say about that particular dramatic monologue?" I laughed, a rich, free sound I hardly recognized as my own. I rolled, gently pinning him beneath me, looking down into his shining, beloved face. "The professor has retired for the evening," I said, dropping a soft kiss on his swollen lips. "But the man is just getting started." The final barrier fell then, not with a crash, but with a sigh of absolute surrender. We made love again, slowly this time, a languid exploration of this new, shared country. It was a conversation without end, a vow whispered with every touch, every sigh, every shuddering release. It was the answer to every lonely note, the embodiment of every dream sketched in secret. As deep night draped itself over the campus, we dressed in silence, our movements gentle, our eyes constantly seeking each other. I handed him his sweater, my fingers brushing his, a new electricity humming between us. He picked up the now empty espresso cup, a smile playing on his lips. "No more notes," I stated, catching his hand and lacing our fingers together. "No more gifts," he agreed, stepping into the circle of my arms. "Just this," I whispered against his temple. "Just this," he echoed, his breath warm on my neck. We walked out into the cool night, side by side, hands clasped. The mystery was solved, the chase was over. The song he'd heard in my voice was now a duet, ringing clear and unbound in the silent, starlit air. It wasn't an ending, it was the most beautiful, stream-kissed, sensuous beginning. Epilogue. 1 year later, a new framed sketch hangs beside my office door, 2 intertwined coffee cups. The secret admirer's notes are pressed in a book between us on the sofa, cherished relics of how we began. Leo's laughter is now the sound that guides my week. He still draws me, but now he captures our shared life, My smile, once just a dream, is now his most frequent subject. The lonely nightingale's song found its harmony. Our story, born from shy whispers and green ink, is now a bold, beautiful volume we write together every single day. And so concludes the story of the professor and his secret admirer, a tale of hidden notes, breathtaking sketches, and the courage to answer a whispered why with a kiss. Thank you for listening. If this story of found love and vulnerability touched your heart, please follow, rate, and review. It helps new listeners find their next romantic escape. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What was the most romantic gesture in this story for you? Was it the orchid, the sketchbook, or the perfect espresso? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep listening for the whispers of love.